In all you do, it is very important that you marry a woman who truly loves you. Test her. If you must, because you never can tell how weak her will and strength of love for you is until she is tested. I count my last relationship as one of the greatest mistakes of my life, and I hope you learn from my story. Hello, everyone. My name is Adam, 35. And my ex-wife, Paige, 30th, and I were married for 3 years before I ended up in a hospital bed because of her. I lived in a countryside whose name I'll be withholding, and I was a well-known doctor. The first time I met Paige was at a local bar, and I had gone there to calm my nerves and drink a bit. Most importantly, I was there to meet some of my old friends who I had been ditching their invitations to hang out for months. We were sitting on a table when my eyes caught an elegant caramel-skinned lady with long black hair and honey brown eyes attending to men at the bar, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. Since I had divorced my ex-wife, I had not seen any girl that beautiful, and I knew instantly that I liked her. Even my friends who were also at the table with me noticed that I was checking out Paige, and they began to tease me. They were the ones who told me that Paige was an evening shift bartender and they knew her very well since they were regulars. They also told me that she was a woman who didn't mix business with pleasure, but I could go and talk to her if I wanted to. Truth is, they all tried talking to Paige themselves, but she was strict with them. Just as we were talking about Paige, an argument broken out between Paige and one of the guys she was serving at the counter. We thought it was one of those normal bartender arguments and we didn't pay attention to it. Unfortunately, it escalated and the guy broke a bottle. I can't really recall how I sprinted from my chair to the counter, but the bad news is I got stabbed in the shoulder. It happened so fast, and before I realized what I had done, I was bleeding profusely. My friends were shocked at my bravery, and the guy who mistakenly stabbed me was kicked out of the bar. Paige, on the other hand, was frightened. She said she was used to having arguments with most of the men who were annoyed, but no one tried to stab her. She wasn't the only one who was surprised I got stabbed for her. I was too. And at the time, I jumped from my chair. It seemed like the right thing to do. That evening, I ended up going back to the hospital to get my stab wound cleaned and stitched, since it was only a 7-minute drive from the local bar. Deep inside, I expected Paige to accompany me to the hospital that evening, but she didn't. She continued working, and I felt really stupid because I didn't have the chance to get her name at the hospital because of how deep the stab was, and how it affected my right hand's flexibility. I was allowed to take a week off to heal properly. I didn't know Paige had gotten information about me from one of my friends at the bar, and she went to the hospital to find me. When she didn't see me there, she came over to my house with a small bag of fruits. I still laying in bed half asleep when I heard my doorbell ding. When I got to the door, I was surprised to see Paige standing outside. I was completely overwhelmed with excitement, and she could see it on my face as I opened the door to let her in. I couldn't take my eyes off her mesmerizing beauty, and I could tell from how she reacted that my non-stop staring at her face made her very uncomfortable. She had come to thank me for standing up for her that day, and also to see how I was doing. After we were done introducing ourselves, we had a few bottles of beer and she left. She promised to come back and check on me if I was okay with that, and I said she could. 2 days later, she showed up again, but she rang me this time around before coming. We had exchanged numbers from her previous visit, so she could call and check on me whenever she wanted to. I don't know why, but I felt the need to make us lunch. But sadly, I ruined it with too much salt. It was funny and embarrassing because my meals were never salty, but because I wanted to impress her, I messed things up for myself. Instead of eating like I planned, we spent the whole of that afternoon talking about ourselves and everything that came to mind. When we were tired of talking, we went out to grab pizza and some fizzy drinks, and that was when I summoned the courage to ask if I could take her to a date. She agreed, and we fixed the date that was comfortable for us. Eventually, we had our first date, and it was fantastic. One of the things I loved most about Paige was her sense of humor. She could crack jokes and laugh about anything and everything. Also, she was very active, friendly, and her small voice was very heartwarming. She also had a couple of tattoos on her right arm, a double nose piercing and a tongue piercing. Ideally, thinking of dating someone that looked or dressed like Paige was not something I would have done in my early or late 20s, but I was at the phase of rediscovering my life. And I was open to dating any kind of person so far. They were kind to others and treated others right. After our first date, I invited her over to my house on the night she wasn't working at the bar. I wanted to spend the night with her and she didn't have a problem with that. When she came that evening, we had dinner together, watched a movie, and after we shared a shower, the rest of the night was filled with fun and pleasure. And the next morning, she left. After that first sleepover, we had many more like that and more dates. She knew I loved her and she loved me too. We didn't start dating until 4 months after. At that point, I was deeply in love with her and I didn't want another man to take her away from me. With Paige, I was as transparent as water. I told her everything about me, my ex-wife, my career, finances, and even the things she didn't need to know. She told me about her ex-boyfriends too. The ones that were calm, hot-headed, and how she broke up with them. So I was 100% sure that she was single. The same day, she accepted to be my girlfriend. I asked her to move in with me and she did. I was so happy because I had been living alone for 4 years. And no matter how I tried to connect with women, I couldn't. I guess it was because I didn't see the kind of woman that I loved. And when I met Paige, I didn't want to lose the second chance the universe gave me. Paige and I lived together for 14 months, and those 14 months were one of the happiest moments of my life. We ate together, bathed together, and even prayed together. I went to work every day happy, and I was always looking forward to go home to Paige. She made me so happy and, funnily enough, we barely had fights. Paige was sweet in all areas, and her cooking was fantastic. The only issue was her stubbornness. Even while we were only friends, I asked her to stop working as a bartender and learn a new skill because I was not comfortable to the kind of people that she was exposed to at the bar, but she refused. This was the only reason we had disagreements, and after trying for months, I stopped talking about it. I even offered to pay her to stay at home if she wanted to, but refused. On the fun side, we went on so many vacations together. And we even started rock climbing. Being with someone like Paige was a dream come true. She ticked all of my boxes, including the boxes in my head that I never told anyone about. Our intimacy life was mind-blowing because we were always exploring. She also had an open mind and never judged me for the things I suggested in the bedroom. The town we lived in was not too big, so most of the community knew we were together. My friends were surprised that I was dating Paige and some subtly tried to talk me out of it. They believed I only wanted to tap her honeypot and nothing serious, but I told them I loved Paige and I was with her because I wanted to. In my heart, I believed they wanted to ruin my relationship with Paige because they tried to get her and they couldn't. So they were mad. I didn't know that my friends were talking out of concern until things turned out the way it did. If I must add this, there's absolutely nothing I didn't do for Paige. I got her whatever she wanted, as far as she mentioned it. Even the ones she did not mention, I got them for her too. I took her shopping whenever she wanted to shop. She knew my card pins. I wrote her blank checks, and I bought her something fancy every time I received my salary. I did all of these things because I loved her a lot and I was already envisioning us spending our lives together. I even extended my generosity to her family just to show her that I meant serious business. Despite all of the disapprovals and attitude I got from my friends, I still went ahead to marry Paige. When some of my friends did not attend my wedding, I got mad and cut them off. If I saw them at a social gathering or bumped into them anywhere, I would snub them and talk to someone else. Most of them were happily married and I didn't get why they didn't want me happy too. What I didn't know was that they knew something I didn't. They were regulars at the bar, and in a place like that, news traveled fast. There were rumors of Paige being involved with one of the guys from a notorious bikers gang to shock you. He was the same ex-boyfriend she told me she had broken up with. She told me she left him because he was a drunkard biker and he used to physically abuse her. Funny enough, she never reported him to the police. She believed she was the one who angered him. And to make her pay, he had to hit her. And because of how stubborn I was concerning Paige, no one told me anything. I guess it was because I was always offensive and I didn't let them explain why they were against me dating Paige. Almost a year after our marriage, I started noticing some strange behaviors with Paige, things like her spending more time on her phone and always guarding it, like there was something in it she didn't want me to see. She also seemed distant, and we weren't as close as we used to be while we were dating. She also began to come back the bar at very odd hours. Normally, she was supposed to come home at 11 p.m. every night. But she would come home by 2 or 4 a.m. on some nights. And whenever I asked her about it, she'd say she decided to sleep a bit at the bar. Since I didn't know her to be a liar, I believed her and I didn't pay attention to the changes like I was supposed to. Also, at that time, my workload had the hospital increased, and I was barely home. Though a part of me wanted to talk to my friends about what I was seeing, but I had no one to talk to, and the few friends that were left were not people I wanted to talk to about Paige, so I kept it in. The thing that happened after Paige's suddenly change in attitude still breaks my heart till date, and I have to share it. That evening, I returned from my morning shift and I reached home by 7 am and Paige was not home. The house looked exactly like I had left it the previous night. And all the signs showed that Paige did not come home that night. At first, I called her phone several times, but she did not respond. I became scared because it was unlike her to not take her calls. Her phone was always in her apron, so she was always close to it. When I couldn't reach her, I called the bar she worked for, and they told me she left work at 11 p.m. as usual. I didn't want to panic, so I decided to have my bath first. And if she didn't return by the time I was done, I'd call her parents before I notified the police. Long story short, she came home when I was in the bathroom, and that day we had the worst fight ever. She did not have any reason for not sleeping at home. And she became very defensive. When I got tired of arguing with her, I decided to rest so I could go back to the hospital that night for my morning shift. We didn't talk the whole day. And even when I went grocery shopping, I didn't ask her to come with me. When it was time to go to work, I had my bath, got dressed and hopped into my car, and all of this happened around 10. Well, the next thing I remembered is seeing a very bright light and waking up in the hospital several weeks after. If you're thinking Paige was the one who drove the truck that hit me, no, she didn't. She did something far worse. While I was asleep that evening, she went to my car and she cut the brakes. I had barely gone far from our house when I got to a traffic light and the car wouldn't stop. I ended up losing my left arm in that accident, and I was in a coma for several weeks. I was rushed to the same hospital I worked at, and luckily for me, I survived. My case was very complicated because when the police did their investigation and found out the brakes of my car was not working before the accident, they decided to dig deeper. They asked Paige, who was pretending to be sad, if she knew anyone that would hurt me, but she said no. The police also asked the neighbors if they had seen the last time I drove the car, and someone who saw me after I returned from grocery shopping that day said she had seen me. That was how they knew the time frame. The brakes were cut. Luckily for me, they dig deeper and got footage from a neighbor's outside camera, and they saw Paige running to the car and running back about an hour before I left for work. They took her in for questioning, and in the end, she agreed to cutting my car brakes. They also found out she did not do it alone, but with her ex-biker boyfriend. I was very heartbroken, and by the time I was out of my coma, they were both sentenced to a life imprisonment. It turned out that she and her boyfriend had been planning it months after we started dating, but she wanted to earn more of my trust. The whole idea came from her biker boyfriend, and she said she cut the brakes that day because I yelled at her. Their intention was to get rid of me so they could go away with all of my money, and they didn't think I would survive. They wanted the death to look as natural as possible. But everything was ruined. It's been 2 years now and I'm still picking up the pieces of my life. I had a robo left hand inserted because of my profession. And I'm a bit glad. My friends who I snubbed because of Paige did not desert me when I needed them the most. I divorced her and she signed her divorce papers in prison. Most times, I feel sad for her, but it's better for her to be in prison than for me to be in a grave. Stop. Most of you are not subscribed. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the video. Everything helps for the algorithm.